In this video, I'm going to introduce you to adding and subtracting polynomials, and then also some vocab words that go along with polynomial expressions and how you classify them and then also write them in standard form. So the first thing that I'm going to do is just talk to you what a polynomial is. Now, a polynomial is going to be what's called a math expression that is written with one or more algebraic terms. And a polynomial can have things like a constant, which means a number term. It can have variables, meaning letters. And those variables can have powers on them, and that is called an exponent. So you see how this y has a power of 2? That's your exponent there. But what it cannot have is it cannot be divided by a variable or have negative exponents. So things like a letter in the bottom of a fraction, that's not allowed. And then also negative powers. So that's why you see this circle with the slash through it to say this would be an example of a polynomial, but these two would not. Now, some other examples of polynomials could be just a number term. So it says constant here. An example of that would be something like just a number term. So like maybe the number 5. Another example would be something that starts with some letters. So maybe an x plus 5. Or you may have more than two terms. You may have a lot of terms. So something like a cube plus some square term plus a linear term and then plus a number. That could be a different example. And these could be positive or negative. It doesn't matter. So maybe you have a negative term here, or maybe your linear term here, the x term was negative. That could be another example. Anything that has, obviously here, like I said, no letter in the denominator, and then no powers on your letters can have a negative number. Okay, now for standard form. How do you write standard form? I actually did do an example here without telling you, but standard form for a polynomial means that the terms are placed in descending order so that your powers, the exponents, go down from the largest to the smallest. Now, the smallest would be a number term that has no letter. And so what that would mean is that your letter had a power of 0 because there wasn't any letter there. Now, I'm going to erase that because you don't need that as part of your term. So you'll notice that this term doesn't have the letter. Again, the last term doesn't have a letter, doesn't have a letter. Here, there was only one term, so that just ends up being the term you had. So examples would be the power of 3, then 2, then 1, then none. And then here a 2, then 1, then none. Here the power, you always put your letters first, power of 1, then no letter, and then power of 1 here. Now degree is going to be for your polynomial, and you classify your polynomial based on degree. And it is the largest power that you see. So here the degree would be 3. Here the degree would be 2. Here the degree would be 1 because you have 1x, x to the first power that is, and here degree would also be 1. And the leading coefficient is the coefficient of that first term, meaning the number in front of that power term. So here your lead coefficient would be the number 6 in the front. Here the leading coefficient would be the number in the front, which is 4. Here the leading coefficient, the number in the front is 8. And here the lead coefficient is the number -10. All right, now classifying polynomials. You can classify polynomials two ways. One by the degree and by the number of terms. Degree we kind of already introduced, which would be the largest degree or exponent of its terms. And an example here would be 4x squared plus 6x minus 8. The degree here is 2. And then again, like we talked about leading coefficient, that lead coefficient would be 4. And so what I'm going to do is help you classify polynomials by degree. And a polynomial with a degree 0 would be a constant, meaning there is no letter in your terms. So something like -17 or 5 or 15 or 113, but any term that has no letters at all. Now, a linear term has an x term as its highest power. So like -17x. Now, you can have a number behind it. That's fine, like maybe a 5. But the highest power of x will be just a power of 1. And then here's another example. Maybe you just have an x term, maybe -13x. Or maybe you have a positive x term, 15x. And you can also have another term with this, but it would have to be just strictly a number term because it has a smaller power. Now a quadratic would be your highest power term has a square. So maybe negative 17x squared. That could be a polynomial that has a degree 2. Or you could have a couple terms, negative 17x squared minus a 13x. But again, it's classified by the square because that's the highest power. Or maybe you had another polynomial like this, negative 17x squared minus 13x and plus 5. Again, this is still classified as a quadratic because the highest power is the 2. And then likewise with the degree 3, your highest power is going to be a cubed term. So maybe I'll switch it up here and make it 7x cubed. And you could have a couple other terms beside your 7x cubed. So maybe like plus 6x squared and plus 10. You know, as long as your highest power is a 3, that would be labeled as your degree. So now I'm going to go ahead and flip the page and then talk about classifying based on number of terms. So number of terms in your polynomial is determined on monomial 1 term, binomial 2 terms, trinomial 3, because tri means 3. Think of it as like a bicycle. Bicycle has 2 wheels, tricycle has 3 wheels. Now polynomial would have 4 or more. So for terms, if you write one single term, it doesn't matter the degree, like x squared, that would be considered a monomial because there's only one single term in the function. Or here's another example, 7. Or another example could be x to the 5th. It could be 15x to the 5th. As long as there is only one term, that's called a monomial. Again, not based on the degree. It could be any degree you want, just means you have one single term for the function. Another one here for binomial, meaning 2 terms, could mean you have an x squared plus an x. It could mean you have your 15x to the 5th plus 7. So there is going to be 2 terms separated by either a plus sign or a minus sign. You could maybe have negative 15x squared minus 7. So the signs don't matter as long as you have 2 things connected by an add or subtract. And then trinomial, you're going to have 3 terms. So let's see here, maybe x squared plus 2x plus 15. Or maybe you have an x to the 5th minus 7x cubed plus 14. So there are 3 unique terms that cannot be added together. And that's probably important that I say unique, meaning you wouldn't be able to have something like this, let's say like x squared plus 4, because this can be combined into 2 terms, which would be 2x squared plus 4. And so your terms to make a trinomial have to be unique and not be able to be added together. And then 4 terms, well, you need 4 terms. So you'll need 3 signs, either plus or minus, to separate what those terms are connecting your terms with. So let's see here, like maybe x cubed plus an x squared plus an x plus 1. That could be an example. Or maybe you get a little bit more jazzy with it, you know, negative 17x to the 8th plus 4x to the 3rd minus 2x plus 5. You know, a polynomial could have more than that. So maybe I want to make this a square and make this a 5x and then plus a 5. That would be another example that has even more terms. This one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 unique terms. So 4 or more would be polynomial. So the last thing that I'm going to do here in this video is to classify with you based on degree and number of terms. So again, degree would be based on the largest exponent that you see, and degree would be constant, linear, quadratic, cubic. And then based on number of terms, 1 term, 2 terms, 3 terms, 4 terms, mono, binomial, trinomial, polynomial. So kind of think of it as like first name, last name, so 2 different ways to name it. So the degree here, because I have no letter x, would be called a constant. There's only 1 term here, and this is called a monomial. For this here, I see I have the variable x. Now the power on that is 1, so that's called a linear term because I have the letter x. And there are 2 terms being added together here, so this is called a binomial. Now the power here, the biggest power is a 2, which is called quadratic. And there are 2 unique terms being added here, so this is called, again, a binomial. And then there are 1, 2, 3, 4 terms here, which is called a polynomial. And for this one, the highest power that I see here is a cube, which would be called a cubic function. And then here for this one, the highest power is a 2. That power is the highest, which is called a quadratic. And there are 1, 2, 3 unique terms, which is called a trinomial. And the reason why we say unique terms is because what are like terms? Those are terms that can be added together. So they should have the same letter with the same power on that letter. And so when we talk about unique terms to make it a trinomial, polynomial, binomial, that's really important. And so I'll actually finish with this here before we start combining. Find like terms in the expression and group them together. That would be our first step. So an x squared with an x squared, or an x with an x. And then do you use the sign that is in front or behind? You want to use the sign in the front. So I'll do a couple of these, and then my next video I'll actually show you specifically adding, and then I'll do another video for subtracting, some other videos for multiplying and dividing. So like terms, what you want to do is highlight terms that are alike because they have the same letter with the same power. So I see an x cubed term here. I see another term that has a cube. And so those two terms I'm going to combine together because they have the same letter, and that letter has the same power of a 3. And I have 1x, and I'm going to subtract 5. 1 minus 5 is 4x cubed. Now I'm going to look at my next highest power term, which is my squares. And I notice that I have a couple of those. Negative 2x squared and a positive 3x squared. And so if I add those together, negative 2 plus 3, I get 1x squared. And then with another color, I'm going to highlight my x term. I have 4x here. And I have an x here, and if I take 4 and I add one more x, so I had 4 x's plus one more, that'd be a total of 5 x's. And then my number terms that are left, I have negative 7 plus 10. Negative 7 plus 10 is going to get me 3, and that would be how you would first combine your function and then classify it. So what's the highest power here? Our highest power is a cube, so this would be a cubic function. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4 terms, which would make this a polynomial. And then again, we can do this problem here. Combining like terms, make sure you combine the same letter with the same power. And so let's start here with our highest power. I think the highest one I see here is a power of 4. And so negative 2 plus 2, oh, those actually cancel out, don't they? So we actually don't have a power of 4. Okay, let's go to the next one, power of 3. I see one over here. No, no, no. Okay, so 1x cubed. Okay, let's go to the next one, x squared. Here's one, and here's another one. Okay. So let's see, put those together. I have 1 of the x squareds minus 6. 1 minus 6 is negative 5 for my x squared term. And then let's see here, my x term. I only have one of those. Negative 7x. I have nothing to combine that with, and then I'm out of highlighter, so I'll just circle the last one. Negative 7 plus 6 is going to get me negative 1. Again, this highest power is 3, which would make this a cubic function. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. 4 or more terms is called a polynomial. And so I will classify this as a cubic polynomial. Stay tuned for some more videos on adding, subtracting, and multiplying.